Welcome, game dev adventurers, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today we're being joined by Doug, Christine, and Bryson, three of the core founders of the Sweet and Power Sauce indie game studio, to talk about crafting a compelling visual style for your indie title, as well as a number of other lessons learned.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
Welcome one, welcome all to the Indie Game Lunch Hour, our live magical podcast where we give game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from industry experts, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode. As always, I'm your host here, the headmaster at the Indie Game Academy, Willem Delventhal, and joining me today are three of the founding members of the Sweet and Power Sauce team. We have Doug, Christine, and Bryson. Doug, our creative director, Christine, our art director and narrative designer, and Bryson, our level designer, on the game Whiskers, Wizards, and Wands, which Sweet and Power Sauce happens to be partnered up with the Indie Game Foundry, our publishing arm that we're just running as one of our three Foundry games. We're very excited to see to see Whiskers, Wizards, and Wands come out soon. It's something like a isometric Zelda-like puzzle platformer with a sweet, adorable style where you make your own wands as a cute cat wizard. Welcome to the show, everybody. What are you having here for lunch today?
We are having toast. So we've got some rice and edamame and salmon and tamagayaki.
Oh,
made with
wow.
some leftovers that we have.
Normally lunch is not this fancy. I guess this is a special occasion.
Well, yeah, normally he's not home for lunch, so I felt like being special.
That is the fanciest answer we've had in a long time. Yeah, what about you, Bryson?
I had breakfast for lunch. I had sausage and scrambled eggs.
Beautiful. I myself am in desperate need of a shop, so I'm sipping on coffee. I chose a fast day today. That was definitely on purpose and was not a lack of forethought. So awesome. I am excited for all of you, and it's sweet that the two of you get to have lunch together. Little intro here. So Doug and Christine, I believe that the two of you know each other, correct?
We
Somehow,
do.
somewhere.
Yeah. We are married.
Oh.
Have been for 11 years.
So you're almost done.
Together for 17 though, so like
wow.
Yeah, I dragged Christine into games with me as I fell farther down this endless hole.
Yeah, I don't like being left out.
Was it like a willing dragging, or was it a kicking and screaming kind of thing, Christine?
I think so.
Yeah, it was willing. It was more like dangling interesting hobby in front of me, like, ooh, wouldn't you like to hang out and do things with me? This is fun. We're making games. And I'm like, oh gosh, how can I participate? I need to have a skill. And
it's kind of funny. The first game jam we did together 7 years ago, I don't think Christine would have described herself as an artist prior to that.
No.
But she made like cut paper, and we had these little paper figures in our game that wiggled around.
Yeah, I thought my only artistic skill I had at that point was making door decks for my friend's college dorm things, and so I was like, well, I know how to do fun paper art. I'll just like cut things up, and we can scan it and use it for a game jam. We had like a 2-month-old at home, and I think I just really wanted to do something because I had like left my job to stay home. So yep.
Amazing. That is so I didn't even really mean that to start the origin story, but that is what you have started here. For those, so I just mentioned Whiskers, Wizards, and Wands. One of the things that we actually found really intriguing about the game, one of the reasons y'all got selected as one of our 3 Foundry games, is the art style. So first of all, I think it's inspiring to everybody listening already that this is one of your earlier attempts at game art. And I also want to use this as an example of leaning into your crafts and your existing strengths. So this is an area that you were experimenting with, playing with, and then you wound up using here in Whiskers, Wizards, and Wands, which created a compelling, unique art style that we thought was really cool. And is part of the reason that we wanted to work with you. Before we go into that, though, let's do the classic indie game lunch hour beginning, which is the origin story. So From all three of you, feel free to take it, whoever wants to start. Can you tell us where you are in games now and how you got there?
Bryson, you first.
Okay. I have played MMOs my entire life, and I feel like that was my origin story. The grandeur and scope of MMOs has like really drawn me into wanting to be a part of that kind of big, huge community. And I guess the gaming community in general has kept me around, whether it's in MMOs or small indie games or what have you. But I started making mods for Skyrim. So I started by doing like different levels and that kind of thing for Skyrim, and that's where I guess got better at games. And then I went to Full Sail University and I got my bachelor's and master's there for game design. And since then, I've been kind of doing game jams and things on the side, but never something professionally until I found a sweet group of people to make some cool games with.
Nice. Awesome. Fantastic. And then who's next here?
It was you.
Yeah, I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, and it was late in my college career that I was required to take a C++ class and absolutely loved it. And so when I graduated, I was living alone for a little while she was finishing up college, and taught myself how to do some coding, and for the purposes of playing games, making games, and went on to do like a game jam a year, and then like 3 game jams a year, and like 30 game jams later, we're doing decided to actually make a studio about it.
Slowly, insidiously made its way deeper and deeper into your life.
Yeah.
And then we heard some of yours, Christine. Is there more to the story besides Doug forced you to do it?
It really isn't forced, unless it's a reverse psychology forcing. No, so originally by trade, I was a medical technologist. So I worked in a laboratory at a hospital. But like I said, stayed home when we had our first kid, and then we had a second kid very shortly after. And yeah, we've always liked doing hobbies and things together. And I think I just so desperately wanted to participate in the things he did that I was like, you know what, I'm going to try to do the art stuff. But I ended up kind of stumbling into something I really loved. Also, that's our cat's tail going across the screen. Sorry about that.
Bonus.
But because of those little game jams that we did at the beginning, we were doing like GM48.
Game Maker.
Yeah, Game Maker. I realized how much I loved art and decided to actually pursue it as a more official career. So ended up doing a lot of my own stuff with that on the side. Now I teach painting classes and do stuff with our studio. But yeah, it pretty much, there were a couple times where Doug would start doing a jam with somebody and be like, oh, it's fine. You don't need to do the art. Like, we got it. And like, they'd start posting a couple things. And I was like, oh, no, just let me do it. Just let me do it.
Amazing.
So I always ended up in it anyway.
That's great. I love the this is already like a very cute episode. We're gonna have to keep the cute ball rolling because of the two of you. It's also great that y'all got started in a different game engine. I'm trying to remember the name of the one that I first used. It was like World Edit or something like that. It was a super, super old school one that was mostly for text adventures, and you could have static images in it. And that was the first game engine I ever touched. And then eventually
Fusion for me.
Yeah, say that again.
That's an older one. Click Team Fusion.
Oh, I don't even know that one. Sawblade Software was another one I played with that was not well known at all. It was Mac only. It was for side-scrolling platformers. Made a ton of games with that and got into Flash eventually, and that was my first sort of like air quotes here official game engine. That's when I got a little bit more serious. But anyway, let's jump into let's talk about Whiskers for a little bit first, and then we'll use that to jump into some of the lessons that you've already learned there. So from your perspectives from the team, tell us about Whiskers, Wizards and Wands, both what the game is and then how it got inspired, how you got started there.
Well, I would describe it as a cute little Zelda-like almost We started with I was inspired by Noita a lot. Their wand system, I think, is super cool.
Mhm.
But it was really complicated to like figure out at first. And I was like, is there a way that we can make this more accessible? So it's almost mechanics first kind of a thing, starting with the wand and then expanding. It took us a while to settle on the art style that we have now.
Mhm.
We tried pixel art, we tried other stuff. We made a lot of game in 2D before switching to 3D. We made a lot of game in Unity before switching to Godot.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we didn't want to tell you this when we applied to the Foundry program, but we actually worked on it for over a year before we
I
finally
knew.
figured it out. Yeah.
I think maybe Jamie told me. Some way, somehow through
Mhm.
the grapevine, I found out. But that was fine.
A lot of it had been thrown away beforehand, so we were still newish to the current version.
Mhm.
But each time we did things and like restarted with 3D, it's like, well, that process took us like less than a month to catch up to where we were at. It's
Mhm.
easier each time, and each time there was like good reasons to do it, and I think we've seen some benefits along the way.
It's been really cool actually to be this involved in a Godot project. I've worked professionally in Unity and in Unreal, and then a number of engines before those two were the kings. But I've never worked professionally on a Godot project, so it's been really awesome to jump into meetings with you and just see some of the Godot workflow, even though I'm not really touching the engine quite as much. All right. So we, for the topic of today, we're here to talk about Whiskers, but we also wanted to get a little bit into the art and the art direction. I'd love to. I haven't heard from Bryson in a hot second. Bryson, could you actually, why don't you describe gameplay for us so people can visualize this a little bit, and then why don't we actually start with how gameplay has evolved over the span of Whiskers?
I think our intent for the player is for them to focus on exploring the level that they're in or the world that they're in, and find clever ways to rearrange their wand as a tool to get past certain obstacles. I think that's how you can describe the core flow of the game. Um, Over time, and this kind of speaks to doing a project, whether it's a small game jam project or this longer project that we're going to take about a year to do. Um, Not to say that it hasn't been on people's minds before this year, but
Hmm.
scope is a big thing that we had to kind of take into account in the very like beginning of our development process, because the gameplay when we were developing the wand, the pieces of the wand, that has a huge impact on what the player is able to do, what puzzles we can give them, and kind of how they can navigate the world or interact with the world. So it the player's experience has evolved, because in the beginning we had like 30 different wand pieces that we could have, and then we were like, okay, well, 30 iterations, or if you put all 30 of those together, what does the wand do? It does this, that, and the other thing, and so many things all at once. So we had to take the wand system and really think it through and scope it back, because there's going to be a lot of edge cases and crazy things that the player could do. So over time, that is probably the biggest thing that's changed for the players, like gameplay loop, is how much they're able to do with their wand, and the um like how their wand interacts with the world and that kind of thing.
Mhm. And can you tell us maybe, so it's easy, there's a million things you can do to any game. An old mentor of mine likes to say that the possible number of games your game can turn into is literally infinite. So, there's a your game can become anything. So can you give us some of the reasoning, some of the testing, some of your own logic behind why that wand and those core mechanics have evolved?
um I think we started with one vision in mind, and through paper prototyping, different puzzles, and then putting the actual mechanics into place to test those mechanics. Some of the things that we had in our mind that would be super fun to do weren't fun in practice. And so actually playing your game is important to find the fun. And I think that's the best way to describe that journey, is like saying something, oh, this would be super cool if the player could make a wand that shot them forward really fast, and then you put that into play and it turns into your player just spamming that ability and like zipping super fast around the world. That might be fun, but what does it do? And if the player is just going to be spamming that, they're not using their wand for other things. So you have to look at the cause and effect of each game mechanic and what you put in the game, because players are built to they're built to spam things and jump over things and break your game. So you have to kind of keep that in mind when you're making anything. You want the player to have deliberate reasons to do each thing that they're doing, in my opinion.
I love that. Yeah, I think finding or chasing the fun is a pretty common statement that game developers and game designers will make, and it's ultimately true. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what your game is. It doesn't really matter how it looks. Doesn't matter how it plays. Doesn't matter what the levels are. Doesn't matter the price. What matters is that the player's enjoying themselves. And enjoying has a whole plethora of terminologies. I hate Elden Ring, but I can't stop playing it. But absolutely, if you simply follow what seems to compel your player, then you get a lot closer than any other more like strict mechanics you might use to try to pick what features go into your game. I also just dropped the Sweet and Power Sauce Discord link. Just like all three of the Foundry teams, they need playtesters, they need friends and community members. If you'd like to learn more about Whiskers, get in on early playtests, help make the game what you hope it would become, jump into their Discord. They could use their help. Support your fellow indies. All right, I'm going to pick on Christine now. Let's hear about that art evolution. Christine and Doug, because the two of you really have tag teamed this. Doug doing the sort of technical implementation of Christine's art. Can you tell us how the art style got decided and then has evolved over time for Whiskers, Wizards, and Wands?
Okay, so the very first iteration of the game was a 2D pixel art isometric version of it. The main reasons why it had started that way were our previous game that we had made that was actually like a release game on Steam. It was just this little micro cozy platformer called Elowen's Light, and that one was pixel art. So the largest art project I had done up until that point had been pixel related. So we're like, let's go into that for this one. And I think the isometric idea was because it was originally going to have a lot of the gameplay would affect the environment. So blocks were switching in and out and things like that. When I think the big shift in art style happened when we went from having the 2D world into the 3D world. Because we already had to redo all of the art assets. So it was a really good opportunity to like really think about what we wanted it to look like. And I think one of the things that played a big role is just with the amount of art that was going to be on the table for me to do, I wanted to enjoy the experience more. And so
of creating the art is what I assume.
Yeah, of making the art. And while I've done some digital things, like traditional art is definitely where my heart is. I love painting. I love alcohol markers. And so it's like, okay, well, let's see if that's something that maybe we can do. So the best way, obviously, to test out an art style is to do a game jam. So we did a little game jam where we made something called an autumn tale. It was the Cozy Autumn Jam. And I painted on canvas all of the art we used in that game.
That was ridiculous. In 2 weeks, she painted an entire game, like over 60 paintings.
Yeah.
Wow.
To get it
and it was our proof of concept. Like, is it possible that we can completely make a video game with a traditional art thing? Like, is this doable? Does it look good? And people loved it. Like that was probably the game jam that we had the most positive response to. And I really had fun with it. And so we're like, well, when we were redoing stuff for this game, let's try to go traditional with it. And we tested out a couple things of trying it, like painting on the canvas, like we had for an autumn tale. We did do some digital tests as well, and a couple different things with markers. And in the end, I just love markers the most. I feel like it gives me the most flexibility for shading and things. So yeah, and it's a little cheaper than acrylic paint, I'll be honest.
That's really cool. I way back in the day, actually, I just mentioned that old school game engine Sawblade software. I made a 2D platformer that was sketch art only, and I manually I made different pieces. Like imagine almost like a 3D rig. I'd make like the forearm of a character hand drawn with colored pencils is what I was using, and then I would scan it all in, cut it up, and then animate it digitally, which I always thought was kind of cool. But regardless, a fundamental fact about indies for everybody here that most of you already know, but in case you don't, your art style being visually distinct is one of the most important aspects of getting you any kind of traction or attention. Your art is your hook that gets somebody interested in playing the game in the first place, and then your actual game, the game design, the fun of the game, is what gets people to talk about it and keep playing it. But your art is how a stranger decides whether or not to play the game. So picking a visually unique, visually distinct art style is, first of all, something that we were looking for in our Foundry applications. That's one of the reasons we worked with you guys. And then second of all, is just something for everybody to be looking for as they're building their own games. How can your art style be visually unique? How can it be something that nobody has seen before somehow, some way? Now, your world building in Whiskers is quite interesting. I'm literally talking about your voxel-based system that is using your art as well, Christine. Can you tell us a little bit about how the world of Whiskers gets built and how it looks?
So, if you want to grab the papers there, the environment. So basically, we still have our world made up of little boxes, little 3D boxes, and I have gone through and I have made all these environmental textures that are getting wrapped around our boxes in game. And we've had to play a lot with the size of the boxes, how much things are getting wrapped, the UVs on the things, how we're doing shading, trying to add some additional papery texture to things post. It's definitely been a bit tricky to get the nice, crisp paper textures. Like my scanner, incredible, but sometimes moving it into the game, things get kind of weird with an engine, which is where he comes in. Doug does all of the making it look better stuff. He'll often call me over and be like, okay, how is this going? And I'm like, well, I don't like these things. I don't know why. Can you make it more like this? And just hope that he knows what we're doing.
We have a thread in our internal Discord that was called "Make It More," how to make the world more papery, and that is still something that we are trying to achieve, as every iteration of the game, making the world more papery.
Yeah, the characters in the world are billboarded assets, meaning they are 2D assets in a 3D world. So think original Doom or something like that. And that's on purpose to make it look like the characters are made of paper. And there was a whole ongoing conversation and exploration of trying to make the world more papery too. That was quite compelling to watch. Actually, do you want to tell any of that story, exploring making your world more papery?
Oh, yeah. So we have some visual aids. One of the things that we have done is we made little guys on popsicle stick, so you can actually play around with them moving like they would in the game. We wanted them to feel like they were almost like stickers or pop-ups in a pop-up book. The way they bounce around and move. Little Paper Mario vibe kind of coming in there. We also I taped a bunch of our papers around one of my kids' little Lego boxes just trying to visually explain what I was thinking with how the paper would lay on top of a stack of things. And because sometimes it's really hard to verbally express the way you want something to happen. And because I personally don't work in engine very much, I am lacking the jargon to properly say what I would like to happen in the game. So I end up literally printing out copies of the things that I scanned in and ripping them. So I'm tearing my own art in order to paste it on things to be like, hey, what do you think about this? Can you do this in a game?
And with anything visual, I mean, I'm just getting into the 3D stuff a little bit more now, and there's just so much jargon, and to properly communicate, you just gotta like show it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for me, a lot of the switch to 3D was due to lighting. The lighting that works automatically in 3D is just so much easier to do than all the weird tricks we were doing in 2D to make it happen.
That's amazing.
And the stick thingies, I had made a little video, really like poor quality, of these like little paper guys moving around, and the reception I got on it was surprisingly positive. So it just went to confirm, leaning into this. This is a great direction to go in.
Mm-hmm. I think I love this. I actually didn't know about your popsicle stick characters. I hadn't seen these yet. This is
I'll share that video sometime.
Please do. This is A, just like adorable. B, I love this as an example of paper prototyping in particular, and just of prototyping in general and getting creative with prototyping. Christine, you're like, I'm non-technical. I want to see how this works without having to rely or wait for something to happen in engine. I'm just going to put some stuff on a popsicle stick. I love that. And then I also love it as sort of creative marketing. So like when we build your Kickstarter video, I could very much see at least starting out with your popsicle stick characters and then maybe transitioning either into the game or maybe into you guys talking for a bit or something like that. So yes, encourage everybody here. It doesn't need to be in engine. It doesn't even need to be on computer. There are plenty of ways for you to start experimenting, for you to start playing with your games, with your game design, with your game visuals that don't involve the traditional tools. And in fact, when you break out of the traditional mold and the traditional tools, you tend to find some of those unique value propositions, some of those areas that make you and your game and your company unique. So I love this as a story. I'm curious for any of you here. Oh, sure.
Our first like playtest night, we didn't have an in-engine playtest for, like, I say this just for a little encouragement for those of you who think like it has to, your game jam that you're working on right now, you know, it may not be as polished or beautiful as you may like it, but our first prototype was not even an in-engine thing. It was basically ran like a D&D kind of campaign where I had paper, like I pasted my camera down onto the paper and I asked the players, like, you know, you're greeted with this, you have a wand that in these little pieces, like, how do you want to build your wand together? Like, how do you think you're going to turn that on? How can you get through this door? So, you know, there's value in prototyping like that.
Love that. Yeah, and it was a good prototype too. I feel like we actually learned a lot that night just from a couple pieces of paper that you threw together. All right, so we're going to switch to community questions here in a second and get your question of the day from you. Before then, do you have any like major lessons learned from this process with Whiskers, either the game, either iteration, either art, whatever else you feel like you've learned from this process that you feel like the average indie really needs to hear and learn from you?
With each of those big changes, like, don't feel like you're throwing work away. This is what improvement looks like sometimes. And with a few of them, I took a break from our project, took a week-long game jam to test things, like going to 3D, test out this robot, a mech game thingy, to test out lighting in 3D. He's like, just don't be afraid to make big changes for your future, because if you're on a big project, it'll pay out in the end, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good one. It is it's easy. I still get stuck in this myself. It is easy to feel like work is wasted when you wind up pivoting. If you discover that one way to do things doesn't work, or if perhaps this happens all the time to us designers, I'm sure you're used to this, Bryson. Like you design something cool and then you cut that feature, or it just doesn't get built. And so that feels like wasted work. Or maybe you get sucked as an engineer into like a technical implementation. You're trying to fix something and it just never quite functions. And then it winds up being way easier than you thought it was in the first place. And it was like 2 weeks of trying to do a solution that didn't actually need to happen. All of that can feel very, can be a little depressing, can dissuade you a little bit, make you feel like you have wasted a lot of time. But ultimately, that is the process, that is the work. And if you are, from a project management perspective, if you're talking about how long something took you to do, that work counts as that time period. So if you spent 2 weeks doing a solution that didn't get implemented and then 2 days to do the solution that did get implemented, that wasn't a 2 day solution. That was a 2 week and 2 day solution. So looking at all of the work as a part of the process, accepting that pivots often actually make your games stronger, and being willing to let go of things and make the game delightful, regardless of how much work gets thrown out, is good. It's good, y'all. Celebrate it. It's okay. Happens all the time. All right. So we're going to switch over to community questions here in just a moment. Before then, Sweet and Power Sauce team, do you have a question of the day for us?
I think the weird thing is, what is a way that you can take one of your other hobbies that you like doing outside of game design and incorporate a part of that hobby into your game design?
Ooh, I love that. So your question of the day, for those who are in the audience, either watching on stream or here in Discord, type out how you might incorporate one of your hobbies into game design, into game development, and put that in the chat for us. At the end of the episode, we will have the Sweet and Power Sauce team pick their favorite, and you'll get a couple of House Cup points. This has me thinking of Warhammer 40K immediately again, like maybe a game where all the art is actual tabletop models? Question mark? That'd be pretty cool. All right, I'm gonna call Rick up on stage. So think about that and type them out in the chat for us, people. I'm gonna call Rick up on stage for our first question of the day. Rick, would you like to ask about your first question there with the 30 jams?
Yeah, so you guys mentioned that you had done 30 jams together over 7 years. That's still a good number. That's probably 4 a year. So you have experience doing the A to Z. What is the longest project you've worked on? Like what's the project of the biggest scope, of the most depth, that took the most out of you as an individual project?
Prior to this, it was Elements Light. It was a 2-week game jam. And then
I think it was a month-long game jam.
It was a month-long game jam, and then we turned it into a finished product. It did get finished. It took me 9 months to get it there, and I was beating myself up the whole time because I wasn't quite experienced enough to know how to properly structure things, and it was a nightmare to maintain the code. And so by the time it was done, I'm like, yes, I'm never touching this again.
Good old spaghetti code.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But not all of those projects were with the whole team or the team that we have now. There's 6 of us. Most of them, Christine did the art, but some of them it was just random experiments.
We've had a mix of the people that make up the current team across the jams. So Doug is the most consistent contributor through all of that. A couple of the jams he just did independently by himself. We have a couple people who have been members of our team previously and still give us a lot of insight. We bounce ideas off of them and stuff, but they were not really able to commit to being a part of the studio as like a whole entity. But I know like there have been times where like myself and our chief engineer did a game jam, just the 2 of us, while other people were busy with things. So, but yeah, no, Elemen's Light was a lot. And honestly, by the end, I think he hated that game.
I hated working on the game. I hated working on the game. And it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
Which,
But
I don't know.
yeah, that's every game though too. I remember my first real like code, like hardcore code, was in ActionScript 3, and I made a Animal Crossing clone, which I still love to this day. And actually, we remade it in a Mega Jam at the Indie Game Academy pretty recently, which was a lot of fun. But the code in that game was first of all in one file because I didn't really understand the concept of classes yet. So it was a single script file that ran the whole game. And it was just the most horrendous spaghetti code of my life. You know, there was no way to know what was actually happening, and fixing bugs was a nightmare. And it is, it's normal. That's a phase of development as well. It's a phase of learning. And it's probably good to like make a couple of those projects and then move on. Learn your lesson.
Yeah, keeping your early projects really, really small is great for learning and iterating yourself and your skills fast.
Yeah, I really like that because you did something that I think is really important, and it's kind of why I asked about what's your longest project. Because, to build a project for a month, a lot of these problems that arise at month 3, 6, 9 don't surface in that first month. So doing those longer term projects gives you an appreciation for having done the groundwork to lay the maintainability of the code later. So that's really a fun story to hear from you.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right. So I'm going to do two things here. One, I'm going to shamelessly plug the Whiskers, Wizards, and Wands Discord one more time. I'll do it a third time later in the episode. If you want to give, Whiskers is still in alpha. If you want to give early feedback to Whiskers, get your feedback heard, and become a part of the dev process, they could absolutely use you. Support your fellow indies. Jump into the Discord. They're sweet, wonderful people. Second, I'm going to remind you for the question of the day here. Tell us how you might take one of your other hobbies and incorporate it into game dev. And then do me a favor, just so it's easier, mark it with an A emoji so that I can see that that's an answer to the question of the day. Towards the end of the episode, we will have the SAPS team pick their favorite for some House Cup points. All right, second question is from Joker of Aces, who asks, given how many game jams you have done, what was your key strategy to rein in scope and not go wild with narrative and art so that you could actually finish within the time limit?
I think we've been pretty conscious of scope from the beginning, because I would say when I came onto the team, we had already done one game jam together, all 6 of us, and then we started on Whiskers, Wizards, and Wands. And when we all got together for this, there was a lot more world building and thoughts of what if we did this, thoughts of like, what if we had the wand interact with the environment, interact with the creatures, where they could walk if it was different environment. So there was a lot. The scope was already way out there, and part of our initial process was already reining in the scope and figuring out what would be the most fun to produce as a game. So I think scope was on our mind from the very beginning, and I think that set the tone for moving forward. We all, have our lives to kind of worry about, and this is one of those things where, as indie devs, all of us are doing 5 other things on top of trying to make a game on our spare time. So we've always been conscious about it. What do you guys think?
I'm pretty merciless at cutting scope a lot. I learned that mostly from trying to design board games and card games, because it's a perfect experience, because you start with a box that you want to put the game into, and like that's already limiting you. And then you want $10 worth of pieces. Okay, if you add a card, you have to take away something else. And throughout the game jams, I got better about guessing how much scope is the right amount for like a 2-week game jam. Jamie's great to work with on our team. He loves generating more scope, and he's okay with you telling him no constantly. And that's okay, because some of those ideas are great ideas, and but like being able to work with that and understand that, you know, there are finite resources and involved.
Yeah.
I'd say it
And I know they asked about getting run away with like the art and narrative. Honestly, I think one of the benefits of being both the art and the narrative person is I know anytime I'm incorporating something into our storyline, something that's interacting, I can tell exactly what art assets I am adding that I'm going to have to do.
Yeah.
I know on some other projects, I wasn't always the narrative person. We'd have other people come in, and it is easy to run away with world building and accidentally give your artist like 50 additional things that they need to put in because of what you wrote. Art can quickly pile up. So I think it's important really thinking like what is necessary, where can we reuse certain things, like is this just decorative, does this add value to the gameplay? But yeah, I appreciate being able to be a little self-checking in that area. And also just doing traditional art is limiting in itself because I can only crank out so much in a given time. So we do have to be a little more picky and choosy with what we put in there.
One of the early things someone mentioned, like, can we animate our characters? And no, we cannot. Like it is one picture, and we can tilt it. We can squash and squish it, but like we get one image for our character, and that's.
I mean, I feel like that's not entirely accurate. We definitely have some that have a couple sprites that they alternate between. We have expressions that switch out and stuff like that.
But you've set some constraints that help you stick to scope deadlines.
Yeah, so I don't have to draw the same cat 17 times.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of good lessons here. I think obviously having a producer-like person, Doug, you act as creative director, but it seems like you're sort of doubling as producer. Having somebody who is willing to just wield the triage sword is incredibly valuable. I have always found I love having a good producer while I'm a game designer, because then that leaves me free to be like, oh, look at all these wonderful things we could do. And then the producer says, nope. We can only do X, Y, and Z. And I go, okay, cool. Let me think of wonderful things within X, Y, and Z. That's like my favorite relationship. And then for everybody who's just trying to figure out how to do jams in their own games better, one of the best things you can do to stick to scope is to set yourself real deadlines. So even if you have a 2-day jam, have at 12 o'clock at noon on Saturday, we're going to hit alpha. And this is what's in alpha with an actual feature list. And then when you get to that point, that's going to force you to go, okay, we didn't get there. What are we cutting to make it more realistic for us to get to the next deadline? That'll be one of your biggest things. And then have yourself scheduled times to triage as well. So sit down, look at what's left on the feature list, actually make feature lists if you don't already do that, and then cut a couple of things and just practice doing so. I agree that game jams, and interesting one there, Doug, doing tabletop games where you are literally limited on space and manufacturing costs are also really interesting practices in learning better scope. An extension of this question, also from Joker, is what do you do when IRL or tech issues come up and greatly decrease your time for a game jam? Do you have contingency plans to make up your deadline, or do you do something else?
In a game jam, I do exactly what Willem said. About halfway through the game jam is when you stop adding stuff to the game, and you just take what you have and polish it up, make it nice, make it work, get the bugs out, play it, export it. You should export it because sometimes that's different. But you just gotta find something to cut, and hopefully you're starting your experience with like a North Star to go towards. Like, we want to make this game feel action-packed and like frantic. Okay, so like just hold on to that feeling and and do what you can to embrace that with what you have.
Yeah, gameplay and emotional pillars. Your gameplay pillars, your game design pillars, or your emotional objectives. People use a couple different terms to refer to the same thing. Your couple of declarative North Star statements. This should be action packed. This should feel like arriving at a strange new place. Agreeing on those super early in the process makes your games 10 times better. It's one of the first easiest things for you to do. I love doing it in game jams because you can so clearly see the impact of those choices. Because if you agree that this game is all about the feeling of arriving at a strange new place, and then you look at that feature list, you can go, well, I don't think that's actually going to hit that objective. And it just assists so much in problem solving as a team. All right, I think this will probably be the last community question, and then we will get your favorite answer from the question of the day before closing down the episode. Terrence asks, can you talk about your transition to learning to make 3D assets? That seems so difficult to do in a game jam.
Man, I've been avoiding that the whole time. That's why we're having a paper-themed game. I a couple weeks ago struggled a little bit with Blender, and I correctly unwrapped some cubes. That's honestly about it. Although I've done a lot of studying with shaders and lighting and such. The building stuff inside Godot. Tutorials are your friend. Blender is clunky. Godot is surprisingly smooth as from like a usability standpoint. But just YouTube tutorials are great.
So I would also say that this question kind of comes up close to another question that wasn't asked but is close. I would say knowing your strengths is important, and not biting off more than you can chew for a 2-week game jam is very important. I said earlier, like in chat, how I have like 30, I have as many unfinished projects as Doug and Christine have finished game jams. And I would say that about 75% of them get up to animation and then stop, because I cannot animate anything. And that is like, I'll make a level, I'll make an area for you to play in, I'll make it so that the character can run around and maybe they have a gun that they can shoot or something. But as soon as it gets to making a crouch animation, I can get that one done. But anything further than that, the project just falls off, I lose steam, and it's done. So if I was to be better at doing that, better at making animations, then I could continue, or I could find somebody who's good at it and ask for help. And I think that is another avenue. If it's not, I think that being a generalist at everything is sweet, but being an indie dev, you're already like halfway there, and you have to learn a little bit of everything, but also knowing when something is just not your strong suit and asking somebody else for assistance or to teach you their best practices or something like that. I think that is also super important.
I remember hearing that the game Slime Rancher has cute little slimes and is in first person because the creators of it don't want to animate humanoid figures.
Yeah, I was going to actually say that
Such a mood.
as you were talking, Bryson, a lot of the best, like creative, especially in the indie sphere, creative solutions to problems are because somebody didn't want to do something or felt like they were too weak at doing something.
The cat doesn't have arms.
Yeah, right.
Yes, the cat doesn't have arms because they have a little wand to hold up.
It magically goes around. It's great.
Yeah.
I've done arms. I don't want to do
arms. It's an intentional tonal decision. It was on purpose. Yeah.
To be fair, we tried a lot of body styles before we settled on this one, which I think I dubbed the bean.
Yeah, I actually think so. It's interesting. So I started as an engineer and then moved into game design. And one of the things that's really interesting is the engineers are your go-to problem solvers. You go, all right, we're having this problem with the game. Engineer, can you fix it? And now I'm a designer. And what I've realized is that designers are, I mean, everybody on the team, I should say. I'm not trying to, these are just the two areas that I've worked in professionally. So I have the most to say about them. But designers are also problem solvers, but the way they solve problems instead of architecture changes, it's design changes. So there are absolutely ways to change your game to enable you to move on. So, like, if you can't figure out how to make your friggin' arms beautiful, we don't need arms. That's fine. Like, hey, it's even cuter this way, actually. Or if you can't figure out how to do crouch animations, do we need a crouch button? Maybe it's fine without crouching. Maybe it's even a more interesting choice to not have crouching. There's tons of ways that you can solve problems. It doesn't just have to be a figure out the coding solution to it. All right. I would like to get your opinions, team, on your favorite answer to your question of the day. So I'm going to give you a summary of each of them. 316 is a Magic the Gathering player. So they use their knowledge of balance to keep the games they're working on having a good sense of interactivity and giving unique qualities to different objects in their games. Rick likes to break down moments of joy that drive you into the hobby of game dev at all in their core game dev loop. Christy is a runner and a writer, so maybe create a game about a letter running from its destiny to be inside the pages of a book. I wrote a game about literal tabletop models. I think that'd be cute. I love my tabletop models. And then Scott says, I've been dabbling in digital music, so I've been adding my own compositions to my projects. Which is your favorite answer to the question of the day?
I'm biased towards the book one with the letter running away because I think that sounds hilarious to me.
I love that all of these kind of speak to the individual who is saying them. I can feel that 316 is like a designer. I can feel that Rick is very like moment oriented. I feel that you the writer in the room is Christy. It makes sense.
Do we have consensus? Are we giving this to Christy then?
I could see Christy being the winner of this one.
Yeah. Even a thematic thing is good too. All the methods are wonderful as well.
I will give a special shout out as well to the Magic the Gathering one though, because I think there's a lot you can learn from that game to apply to other genres.
Well, I also just absolutely. Yeah, all of these are great answers. Thank you, everybody. And to those who are listening, whenever we do a question of the day, speak it out loud, do a little practice in the moment. I just want to shout out Magic the Gathering. I went to an event at GDC this year where they gave me 2 booster packs. And I used to play Magic a little bit when I was younger, but I mostly stopped playing. After those 2 booster packs, I have now spent $200 on Magic booster packs, and I've made 3 decks, and I'm fully addicted again. So thanks, Wizards of the Coast, for those 2 free boosters that you knew would get you way more money out of me. Christy, you have earned House Cup points for your game idea about a letter running from its destiny as being a page of the book. Love that. Also very, very indie. Christy, let us know who those are for. Looks like House Ranger has won 3 House Cup points. All right, it's time for us to wrap up the episode. We like to do 2 things here. So first things first, what is a homework assignment that we can assign to the listeners to practice some of what we talked about here today? They'll take about an hour and that they can do in the next week.
I would extend it our question as our homework assignment. Find something that you are good at outside of game design. I am a bartender in real life, and I make cocktails and that sort of thing, and make mysterious concoctions that might taste good. How would you implement that in a video game? So maybe my game is about chemistry and cooking and that kind of thing. So maybe draw up how something that's in your life that's not game related could be gamified or made into a game. I think that would be my homework assignment. What do you guys think, Christy?
Perfect.
Yeah.
I was going to say try a new hobby, but I think
All hobby related.
the idea here is to focus on the hobbies that you already have.
I love it. Awesome. So your homework assignment, everybody, is to take something you're already good at, a hobby, a love, something that you care about, and figure out how you can incorporate it into a game design. Write us up a paragraph or two, post it to LinkedIn, and tag the Indie Game Academy as well as the Sweet and Power Sauce team. We'll take a look at it, give you some thoughts and feedback. We'd love to see what you come up with. And it's good to always practice, of course. So before we end the episode, as always, is there anything you'd like to plug here, team, or any last words of wisdom you would like to drop?
I think Willem's about to plug our Discord. We'd love to hear from you and get your opinions. And really, we're trying to follow what people want in our game.
Mm-hmm. And actually, we also have some other socials that we've been starting up. We have a TikTok now, so like you can see videos where our marketer makes fun of me rotating my paper around a ton while I draw. But yeah, so we're Sweet and Power Sauce pretty much everywhere. So we'd love to have you interact. Share pictures of your pets with us. If you're in the Discord, I love to post pictures of our dogs and cat. And I would love to see yours.
All right. Yes, I will shamelessly, religiously plug the Sweet and Power Sauce team. I love this team. They are obviously a kind, considerate, and dedicated, energetic indie team, and the game is adorable. Whiskers, Wizards, and Wands. I fully expect this to be my cozy comfort game out of the three games that are coming from this cohort. So absolutely join them on Discord. The link is down below for anybody who is listening to this podcast after the recording. Any links mentioned in the episode will be down below in the description. The fact that they're in alpha means that all of you get to get your voices heard a little bit more. All three teams in this cohort have been wonderful about listening to their playtesters and getting ideas from their audience. So you might throw them some random idea that winds up getting incorporated into the final game. So we would love to see you in there if you would like to support your fellow indies. I think that's going to be it for this episode. As always, we will see everybody again next week at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. That is always our time slot for this episode, for this podcast, I should say. And it's been such a pleasure, Sweet Power Sauce team. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Always. 100%. Thank you, everybody,
Appreciate
for
being
asking
here.
your questions. Yes. And thank you to those who are listening. As always, if you enjoyed, who is one other person who might enjoy this episode that you could send it along to for us? All right. That's it. Goodbye, everybody. See you next week.
Game over.